Hey there, bro. All right. Welcome back into the cafe, everyone. Oh, oh, excuse me. I worked today, so it's just a little tired. Hopefully, everybody is having a good day, and we will be starting the last book of the Divine Comedy, known as Paradiso, tonight. And it's Dante's journey through paradise or heaven. So, with this, that means there's only three more streams left until I finish the story, which means I want you guys to start deciding what story you guys want me to read next. And vote for that at the cafe, please. You're in the Discord. So we're going to start off with Canto 1, The Ascent to the First Heaven, the Sphere of Fire. The glory of him who moveth everything doth penetrate the universe, and shine in one part more and in another less. Within the heaven which most his light receives was I, and things beheld which to repeat nor knows nor can who from above descends, because in drawing near to its desire our intellect engulfs itself so far that after it the memory cannot go. Truly, whatever the holy realm I had the power to treasure in my mind shall now become the subject of my song. O good Apollo, for this last emprise, make of me such a vessel of thy power as giving the beloved laurel asks. One summit of Parnassus hitherto has been enough for me, but now with both I needs must enter the arena left. Enter into my bosom, thou, and breathe, as at the time when Marsyas thou didst draw out of the scabbard of those limbs of his. O power divine, lendest thou thyself to me, so that the shadow of the blessed realm stamped in my brain I can make manifest. Thou'lt see me come into thy darling tree, and crown myself thereafter with those leaves of which the theme, and thou shalt make me worthy. So seldom, Father, do we gather them, for triumph, or of Caesar, or of poet, the fault and shame of human inclinations, that the Paeanian foliage should bring forth joy to the joyous Delphic deity, when any one it makes to thirst for it. A little spark is followed by great flame. Perchance with better voices after me shall prayer be made that Sarah may respond. To mortal men by passages diverse uprises the world's lamp, but by that one which circles forth uniteth with three crosses. With better course and with a better star conjoined its issues, and the mundane wax tempers and stamps more after its own fashion. Almost that passage had made morning there and evening here, and there was wholly white that hemisphere, and black the other part. When Beatrice towards the left-hand side I saw turned around, and gazing at the sun, never did eagle fasten so upon it. And even as the second ray is wont to issue from the first and reascend, like a pilgrim who would fain return, thus of her reaction, through the eyes infused, in my imagination mine I made, and sunward fixed mine eyes beyond our wont. There much is lawful which is here unlawful, unto our powers by virtue of the place, made for the human species as its own. Not long I bore it, nor so little while I beheld it sparkle round about like iron that comes molten from the fire. And suddenly it seemed that day to day was added, as if he, who has the power, had with another sun the heaven adorned. With eyes upon the everlasting wheels stood Beatrice, all intent, and I on her fixing my vision, from above removed. Such at her aspect inwardly became, as Glaucus tasting of the herb that made him peer of the other gods beneath the sea. To represent, transhumanize in words, impossible were, the example then suffice, him for whom grace the experience reserves. If I was merely what of me thou newly createst, Love who governest the heaven, thou knowest, who didst lift me with thy light. When now the wheel which thou dost make eternal, desiring thee, made me attentive to it, by harmony thou dost modulate and measure, then seemed to me so much of heaven enkindled by the sun's flame, that neither rain nor river e'er made a lake so widely spread abroad. The newness of the sound and the great light kindled in me a longing for their cause, never before with such acuteness felt, whence she who saw me and I saw myself, to quiet in me my perturbed mind, opened her mouth ere I did mine to ask, and she began, Thou makest thyself so dull with false imagining, that thou seest not what thou wouldst see if thou hadst shaken it off. Thou art not upon earth as thou believest, but lightning fleeting is appropriate sight. Ne'er ran as thou, who thitherward returnest. If of my former doubt I was divested by these brief little words, more smiled than spoken, I in a new one was the more ensnared, and said, Already did I rest content from great amazement, but am now amazed in what way I transcend these bodies' light. Whereupon she, after a pitying sigh, her eyes directed towards me with that look a mother casts on a delirious child, and she began, All things, whate'er they be, have order among themselves, and this is from, and then, and this is form that makes the universe resemble God. Here do the higher creatures see the footprints of the eternal power, which is the end, whereto is made the law already mentioned. In the order that I speak of are inclined all natures by their destinies diverse, more or less near unto their origin. Hence they move onward unto ports diverse, o'er the great sea of being, and each one with instinct given it which bears it on. This bears away the fire towards the moon. This is in mortal hearts the motive power. This binds together and unites the earth. Nor only the created things that are without intelligence this bow shoots forth, but those who have both intellect and love. The providence that regulates all this makes with its light the heaven forever quiet, wherein that turns which has the greatest haste. And thither now, as to a sight decreed, bears us away the virtue of that cord, which aims its arrow at a joyous mark. Sorry, throat's a little dry. True it is, or true is it, that as oftentimes the form accords not with the intention of the art, because an answering is a matter deaf, so likewise from the course doth deviate sometimes the creature who the power possesses, though thus impelled to swerve some other way, in the same wise as one may see the fire fall from a cloud, if the first impetus earthward is earthward is wrested by some false delight. Thou shouldest not wonder more, if well I judge, at thine ascent at the than at a rivulet from some high mount descending to the lowland. Marvel it would be thee, if deprived of hindrance, thou wert seated down below, as if on earth the living fire were quiet. Thereat she heavenward turned again her face. Canto II. The first heaven, the moon. Spirits who, having taken sacred vows, were forced to violate them, the lunar spots. O ye who in some pretty little boat, eager to listen, have been following behind my ship that singing sails along, turn back to look again upon your shores. Do not put out your sea, lest peradventure in losing me you might yourselves be lost. The sea I sail has never yet been passed. Minerva breathes, and pilots me Apollo, and Muses nine point out to me the bears. Ye other few who have the neck uplifted, betimes to the bread of angels upon which one liveth here and grows not sated by it, well may you launch upon the deep salt sea your vessel, keeping still my wake before you upon the water that grows smooth again. Those glorious ones who unto Colchos passed were not so wonder-struck as you shall be, when Jason they beheld a ploughman made. The concreted and perpetual thirst for the realm deform did bear us on, as swift almost as ye the heavens behold. Upward gazed Beatrice, and I at her, and in such space perchance as strikes a bolt and flies, and from the notch unlocks itself. Arrived I saw me where a wondrous thing drew to itself my sight, and therefore she, from whom no care of mine could be concealed, towards me turning, blithe as beautiful, said unto me, fix gratefully thy mind on God, who unto the first star has brought us. It seemed to me a cloud encompassed us, luminous, dense, consolate, and bright, as adamant on which the sun is striking. Into itself did the eternal pearl receive us, even as water doth receive a ray of light, remaining still unbroken. If I was body, and we were conceived not, how one dimension tolerates another, which needs be if body enter body, more the desire should be enkindled in us, that essence to behold, wherein is seen how God and our own nature were united. There will be seen what we receive by faith, not demonstrated, but self-evident in guise of the first truth that man believes. I made reply, Madonna, as devoutly as most I can do, I give thanks to him who has removed me from the mortal world. But tell me what the dusky spots may be upon this body, which below on earth may people tell that fabulous tale of Cain? Somewhat she smiled, and then, if the opinion of mortals be erroneous, she said, where'er the key of sense doth not unlock, certes the shafts of wonder should not pierce thee now, forasmuch as, following the senses, thou seest that the reason has short wings. But tell me what thou thinkest of thyself, and I, what seems to us up here diverse is caused, I think, by bodies rare and dense, and she, rightly, right truly, thou shalt thou not see immersed in error thy belief, if well thou hearest the argument that I shall make against it. Lights many the eighth sphere displays to you, which in their quality and quantity may noted be of aspects different. If this were caused by rare and dense alone, only one or one only virtue would be or would there be in all, or more or less diffused, or equally. Virtues diverse must be perforce the fruits of formal principles, and these, save one, of course, would by thy reasoning be destroyed. Hello, Amar. Besides, if rarity were this dimness, the cause thou askest, either through and through this planet thus attenuate were of matter, or else as in a body is apportioned the fat and lean, so in like manner this would be its volume, interchange the leaves. Were it the former, in the sun's eclipse, it would be manifest by the shining through of light, as through aught tenuous interfused. This is not so, hence we must scan the other, and if it chance the other I demolish, then falsified will thy opinion be. But if this rarity go not through and through, there needs must be a limit beyond which its contrary prevents the further passing, and thence the foreign radiance is reflected, even as a colour cometh back from glass, the which behind itself concealeth lead. Now thou wilt say the sunbeam shows itself more dimly there than in the other parts, by being there reflected farther back. From this reply experiment will free thee, if e'er thou try it, which is wont to be the fountain to the rivers of your arts. 3 mirrors shalt thou take, and 2 remove, alike from thee. The other more remote, between the former 2 shall meet thine eyes. Turn toward thee, cause that behind thy back, by placing a light, illuminating the 3 mirrors, and coming back to thee by all reflected. Though in its quantity be not so ample, the image most remote, there shalt thou see how it perforce is equally resplendent. Now, as beneath the touches of warm rays, naked the subject of the snow remains, both of its former colour and its cold, thee thus remaining in thy intellect, will I inform with such a living light, that it shall tremble in its aspect to thee. Within the heaven of the diverse repose revolves a body in which whose virtue lies, the being of whatever it contains. The following heaven, that has so many eyes, divides this being by essences diverse, distinguished from it, and by it contained, the other spheres by various differences. All other distinctions which they have within them dispose unto their ends and their effects. Thus do these organs of the world proceed, as thou perceivest now, from grade to grade, since from above they take and act beneath. Observe me well, how through this place I come unto the truth thou wishest, that hereafter thou mayest alone know how to keep the ford, the power and motion of the holy spheres, as from the artisan the hammer's craft forth from the blessed motors must proceed. The heaven which lights so manifold must make fair, From the intelligence profound which turns it, the image takes and makes of it a seal. And even as the soul within your dust, through members different and accommodated to faculties diverse, expands itself, so likewise this intelligence diffuses its virtue multiplied among the stars, its revolving on its unity. Virtue diverse doth a diverse alloyage make with the precious body that it quickens, in which, as life in you, it is combined. From the glad nature whence it is derived, the mingled virtue through the body shines, even as gladness through the living pupil. From this proceeds whate'er from light to light appeareth different, not from dense and rare. This is the formal principle that produces, according to its goodness, dark and bright. What bro? Welcome to Cafe d'Arcadia. I am Reina. Yes, if you're looking for Brawler, he is hiding. Well, he's not here at the moment. But welcome to the story corner at the moment. I am reading Paradiso. We are at Canto 3 at the moment. That sun which erst with love my bosom warmed, of beauteous truth had unto me discovered, by proving and reproving the sweet aspect, and that I might confess myself convinced, and confident so far as was befitting, I lifted more erect my head to speak. Oh, sorry for the scare. Maybe we should choose, or can we turn down the volume for the sound effect, my dear? Is there a way we can choose a softer one? Sorry that that scared you. Such as through polished and transparent glass, or waters crystalline and undisturbed, but not so deep as that their bed be lost. Come back again, the outlines of our faces, so feeble that a pearl on forehead white comes not less speedily unto our eyes. Such saw I many faces prompt to speak. What? I don't know how to do that. Okay. Such saw I many faces prompt to speak, so that I ran in error opposite to that which kindled love twixt man and fountain. As soon as I became aware of them, esteeming them as mirrored semblances, to see of whom they were, mine eyes I turned, and nothing saw, and once more turned them forward, directed into the light of my sweet guide, whose smiling kindled in her holy eyes. Marvel thou not, she said to me, because I smile at this thy puerile conceit, since on the truth it trusts not yet its foot, but turns thee, as 'tis wont, on emptiness. True substances are these which thou beholdest. Sorry guys, my throat's a little dry. turns thee, as 'tis wont, on emptiness. True substances are these which thou beholdest. Here relegate for breaking of some vow. Therefore speak with them, listen, and believe. For the true light, which giveth peace to them, permits them not to turn from their feet. And I unto the shade that seemed most wishful to speak directed me, and I began, as one whom to eagerness bewilders. O well-created spirit, who in the rays of life eternal dost the sweetness taste, which being untasted ne'er is comprehended, grateful 'twill be to me if thou content me, both with thy name and with your destiny. Whereat she promptly, and with laughing eyes, our charity doth never shut the doors against unjust desire, except as one who wills that all her court be like herself. I was a virgin sister in the world, and if thy mind doth contemplate me well, and being more fair will not conceal me from thee, but thou shalt recognize I am Picarda, who, stationed here among these other blessed, myself am blessed in the slowest sphere. All our affections, that alone inflamed, are in the pleasure of the Holy Ghost, rejoice at being of his order formed. And this allotment, which appears so low, therefore is given us, because our vows have been neglected, and in some part void. Whence I to her, in your miraculous aspects, there shines I know not what of the divine, which doth transform you from our first conceptions. Therefore I was not swift in my remembrance, but what thou tellest me now aids me so, that in refiguring is easy to me. But tell me, ye who in this place are happy, are you desirous of a higher place, to see more, or to make yourselves more friends? First with those other shades she smiled a little, thereafter answered me so full of gladness, she seemed to burn in the first fire of love. Brother, our will is quieted by virtue of charity, that makes us wish alone for what we have, nor gives us thirst for more. If to be more exalted we aspired, discordant would our aspirations be unto the will of him who here secludes us, which thou shalt see finds no place in these circles. If being in charity is needful here, and if thou lookest well into its nature, nay, 'tis essential to this blessed existence to keep itself within the will divine, whereby our very wishes are make one, so that, as we are station above station throughout this realm, to all the realm 'tis pleasing, as to the king who makes his will our will. And his will is our peace. This is the sea to which is moving onward whatsoever it doth create, and all that nature makes. Then it was clear to me how everywhere in heaven is paradise, although the grace of good supreme there reign not in one measure. But as it comes to pass, if one food sates, and for another still remains the longing, we ask for this, and that decline with thanks. E'en thus did I, with gesture and with word, to learn from her What was the web wherein she did not ply the shuttle to the end? A perfect life and merit high in heaven. A lady o'er us, said she, by whose rule down in your world they vest and veil themselves, that unto death they may both watch and sleep beside the spouse who every vow accepts, which charity conformeth to his pleasure. To follow her in girlhood from the world I fled, and in her habit shut myself, and pledged me to the pathway of her sect. The men accustomed unto evil more than unto good from the sweet cloister tore me. God knows what afterward my life became. This other splendor, which to thee reveals itself on my right side, and is enkindled with all the illumination of our sphere. What of myself, I say, applies to her. A nun was she, and likewise from her head was taken the shadow of the sacred wimple. And when she too was to the world returned, against her wishes, and against good usage, of the heart's veil she never was divested. Of great Costanza, with the this is the effluent effulgence, who from the second wind of Sobia brought forth the third and latest lucence. Thus unto me she spake, and then began Ave Maria, singing, and in singing vanished, as though deep water something heavy. My sight, that followed her as long a time as it was possible, when it had lost her, turned round unto the mark of more desire, and wholly unto Beatrice reverted. But she such lightnings flashed into my eyes, that at the first my sight endured it not, and this in questioning more backward made me. Canto 4. Questions of the soul and the broken vows. Between two viands equally removed, and tempting, a free man would die of hunger, ere either he could bring unto his teeth. So would a lamb between the ravenings of two fierce wolves stand fearing both alike, and so would stand a dog between two does. Hence, if I held my peace, myself I blame not, impelled in equal measure by my doubts, since it must be so, nor do I commend. I held my peace, but my desire was painted upon my face, and questioning with that more fervent than by articulate speech. Beatrice did as Daniel had done, reliving Nebuchadnezzar from his wrath, which rendered him unjustly merciless, and said, Well, see I how attracteth thee one and the other wish, so that thy care binds itself, so that forth it doth not breathe. Thou arguest, if good will be permitted, if good will be permanent, the violence of others, for what reason doth it decrease the measure of my merit? Again, for doubting to furnish the occasion, souls seeming to return unto the stars, according to the sentiment of Plato. These are the questions which upon thy wish are thrusting equally, and therefore first will I treat that which hath the most of gall. He of the seraphim, most absorbed in God, Moses and Samuel, and whichever John thou mayest select, I say, and even Mary, have not in any other heaven their seats, than have those spirits that just appear to thee, nor of existence more or fewer years, but all make beautiful the primal circle, and have sweet life in different degrees, by feeling more or less the eternal breath. They showed themselves here, not because allotted this sphere has been to them, but to give sign of the celestial which is least exalted. To speak thus is adapted to your mind, since only through the sense it apprehendeth, what then it worthy makes of intellect. On this account the Scripture condescends unto your faculties, and feet and hands to God attributes, and means something else. The Holy Church, under an aspect human, Gabriel and Michael represents to you, and him who made Tobias whole again. That which Timaeus argues of the soul doth not resemble that which here is seen, because it seems that as he speaks he thinks. He says the soul unto its star returns, believing it to have been severed thence whenever nature gave it as a form. Perhaps his doctrine is of other guise than the words sound, and possibly may be with meaning that is not to be derided. If he doth mean that to these wheels return the honour of their influence and the blame, perhaps his bow doth hit upon some truth. This principle ill understood once warped the whole world nearly, till it went astray, invoking Jove and Mercury and Mars. The other doubt which doth disquiet thee, less venom has for its malevolence, could never lead thee otherwhere from me, that as unjust our justice should appear in eyes of mortals as an argument of faith and not of sin heretical, but still that your perception may be able to thoroughly penetrate this verity, as thou desirest, I will satisfy thee. If it be violence when he who suffers cooperates not with him who uses force, these souls were not on the account excused. For will is never quenched unless it will, but operates as nature doth in fire, if violence 1,000 times distort it. Hence, if it yieldeth more or less, it seconds the force, and these have done so, having power of turning back unto the holy place. If their will had been perfect, like to that which Lawrence first upon his gridiron held, and Midas made severe to his own hand, it would have urged them back along the road whence they were dragged, as soon as they were free. But such a solid will is all too rare. By these words, if thou hast gathered them, as thou shouldest do, the argument is refuted. That would have still annoyed thee many times. But now another passage runs across before thine eyes, and such that thyself thou couldst not tread it ere thou wouldst be weary. I have for certain put into thy mind that soul beatified could never lie, for it is ever near the primal truth. And then thou from Picarda mightest have heard Costanza keep affection for the veil, so that she seemeth here to contradict me. Many times, brother, has it come to pass, that to escape from peril with reluctance that has been done it was not right to do, e'en as Alcmaeon, who, being by his father thereto entreated, his own mother slew. Not to lose pity, pitiless became. At this point I desire thee to remember that force with will commingless, commingless, and they cause that the offenses cannot be excused. Thank you, dear. Will absolute consenteth not to evil, but in so far consenteth as it fears, if it refrain to fall into more harm. Hence when Picarda uses this expression, she meaneth the will absolute, and I the other, so that both of us speak truth. Such was the flowing of the holy river that issued from the fount whence springs all truth. This put to rest my wishes, one and all. O love of the first lover, O divine, said I forthwith, whose speech inundates me, and warms me so, it more and more revives me. My own affection is not so profound as to suffice in rendering grace for grace. Let him who sees can thitherto respond. Well I perceived that never sated is our intellect until the truth illuminate it, beyond which nothing true expands itself. It rests therein as wild beast in his lair. When it attains it, and it can attain it, if not, then each desire would frustrate be. Therefore springs up, in fashion of a shoot, doubt at the foot of truth, and this is nature, which to the top from height to height impels us. This doth invite me, this assurance give me with reverence, lady, to enquire of you another truth, which is obscure to me. I wish to know if man can satisfy you for broken vows with any other good deeds, so that in your balance they will not be light. Beatrice gazed upon me with her eyes full of the sparks of love, and so divine that, overcome my power, I turned back, and almost lost myself with eyes downcast. Canto 5. If in the heat of love I flame upon thee beyond the measure that on earth is seen, so that the valor of thine eyes I vanquish, marvel thou not thereat, for this proceeds from perfect sight, which as it apprehends to the good apprehended moves its feet. Well I perceive how is already shining into thine intellect the eternal light, that only seen enkindles always love, and if some other thing your love seduce, 'tis nothing but a vestige of the same, I'll understood, which there is shining through. Thou fain wouldest know if with another service for broken vow can such return be made as to secure the soul from the further claim. This canto thus did Beatrice began, and, as a man who breaks not off his speech, continued thus her holy argument. The greatest gift that in his largest God creating man made, and unto his own goodness nearest conformed, and that which he doth prize most highly, is the freedom of the will, wherein the creatures of the intelligence both all and only were and are endowed. Now wilt thou see, if thence thou reasonest, the high worth of a vow, if it he made, so that when thou consentist, God consents. For, closing between God and man the compact, a sacrifice is of this treasure made, such as I say, and made by its own act. What can there rendered then as compensation, thinkest thou to make good use of what thou'st offered? With gains ill gotten thou wouldst do good deed. Now art thou certain of the greater point, because Holy Church in it this dispenses, which seems against the truth which I have shown thee. Behooves thee still to sit a while at table, because the solid food which thou hast taken requireth further aid for thy digestion. Open thy mind to that which I reveal, and fix it there within, for 'tis not knowledge, the having heard without retaining it. In the essence of this sacrifice two things convene together, and the one is that of which 'tis made, the other is the agreement. This last for evermore is cancelled not, unless complied with, and concerning this, which such precision has above been spoken. Therefore it is enjoined upon the Hebrews to offer still, though sometimes what was offered might be commuted, as thou oughtest to know. The other, which is known to thee as matter, may well indeed be such that one errs not, if it for other matter be exchanged. But let none shift the burden on his shoulder, at his arbitrament, without the turning both of the white and of the yellow key, and every permutation deem as foolish, if in the substitute the thing relinquished, as the 4 is in 6, be not contaminated. Therefore whatever thing has so great weight in value that it drags down every balance, cannot be satisfied with other spending. Let mortals never take a vow in jest. Be faithful and not blind in doing that, as Jephthah, Jephthah was in his first offering, whom more beseemed to say, I have done wrong, than to do worse by keeping, as a foolish thou the great leader of the Greeks wilt find, when swept Iphigenia her fair face, and made for her both wise and simple weep, who heard such kind of worship spoken of. Christians, be ye more serious in your movements, be ye not like a feather at each wind, and think not every water washes you. Ye have the Old and the New Testament, and the pastor of the church who guideth you. Let this suffice you unto your salvation. If evil appetite cry aught else to you, be ye as men, and not as silly sheep, so that the Jew among you may not mock you. Be ye not as the lamb that doth abandon its mother's milk, and frolicsome and simple combats at its own pleasure with itself. Thus Beatrice to me, even as I write it. Then all desireful turned herself again to that part where the world is most alive. Her silence and her change of countenance, silence imposed upon my eager mind, that had already in advance new questions, and as an arrow that upon the mark strikes ere the bowstring quiet hath become, so did we speed into the second realm. My lady there so joyful I beheld, as into the brightness of that heaven she entered, more luminous thereat the planet grew, And if the star itself was changed and smiled, what became I, who by my nature am exceeding mutable in every guise? As in a fish pond which is pure and tranquil, the fishes draw to that which from without comes in such fashion that their food they deem it, so I beheld more than 1,000 splendors drawing towards us, and in each was heard, Lo, this is she who shall increase our love. And as each one is coming unto us, beautiful, full of beatitude, the shade was seen by the effulgence clear that issued from it. Think, reader, if what here is just beginning, no farther should proceed, how thou wouldst have an agonizing need of knowing more. And of thyself thou'lt see how I from these was in desire of hearing their conditions, as they unto mine eyes were manifest. O thou well born, unto whom grace concedes to see the thrones of the eternal triumph, or ever yet the warfare be abandoned, with light that through the whole of heaven is spread, kindled are we, and hence if thou desirest to know of us, at thine own pleasure sate thee. And thus by someone among these holy spirits was spoken, and by Beatrice, Speak, speak securely, and believe them, even as gods. Well I perceive how thou dost nest thyself in thine own light, and drawest from it thine eyes, because they coruscate when thou dost smile, but know not who thou art, not why, or nor why thou hast. Spirit august, are thy station in the sphere that veils itself to men in alien rays. This said I in direction of the light, which first had spoken to me, whence it became by far more lucent than it was before, even as the sun that doth conceal himself by too much light, when heat has sworn away the tempering influence of the vapours dense, by greater rapture thus concealed itself, in its own radiance the figure saintly, and thus close, close enfolded answered me, in fashion as the following canto sings. Canto 6. After that Constantine the eagle turned again the course of heaven, which it had followed, behind the ancients who Lavinia took, 200 years and more the bird of God, in the extreme of Europe held itself, near to the mountains whence it issued first, and under shadow of the sacred plumes it governed there the world from hand to hand, and, changing thus, upon mine own alighted. Caesar I was, and am Justinian, who, by the will of primal love I feel, took from the laws the useless and redundant, and ere unto the work I was attested, one nature to exist in Christ, not more, believed, and with such faith I was contented. But blessed Agapetus, he who was the supreme pastor to the faith sincere, pointed me out the way by words of his. Him I believed, and what was his assertion I now see clearly, even as thou seest each contradiction to be false and true. As soon as with the church I moved my feet, God in his grace it pleased with this high task to inspire me, and I gave me wholly to it. And to my Belisarius I commended, to arms to which the heaven's right hand so joined, it was a signal that I should repose, Now here to the first question terminates my answer, but the character thereof constrains me to continue with a sequel, in order that thou see with how great reason men move against the standard succersant, both who appropriate and who oppose it. Behold how great a power has made it worthy of reverence, beginning from the hour when Pallas died to give it sovereignty. It knowest it made in Alba its abode 300 years and upward, till at last the 3 to 3 fought for it yet again. Thou knowest what it achieved from Sabine wrong down to Lucretia's sorrow, in 7 kings overcoming round about the neighboring nations. Thou knowest what it achieved, borne by the Romans, illustrious by Brennus, against Pyrrhus, against the other princes and confederates. Torquatus thence and Quincitus, from who from locks unkempt was named Deci and Fabi, received the fame I willingly embalm. It struck to earth the pride of the Arabians, who, following Hannibal, had passed across the Alpine ridges, Po, from which thou glidest. Beneath it triumphed, while they yet were young, Pompey and Scipio. To the hill beneath which thou wast born it bitter seemed. Then, near unto the time when heaven had willed to bring the whole world to its mood serene, did Caesar by the will of Rome assume it. What it achieved from Var unto the Rhine. Acer beheld the Saone, beheld the scene, and every valley whence the Rhone is filled. What it achieved when it had left Ravenna and leaped the Rubicon was such a flight that neither tongue nor pen could follow it. Round towards Spain it wheeled its legions, then towards Durazzo and Pharsalia, smote that to the Calid Nile was felt the pain. Alright, that was medication alarm. Antandros and the Simois, whence it started, it saw again, and there where Hector lies, and ill for Ptolemy, then roused itself. From thence it came like lightning upon Juba, then wheeled itself again into your west, where the Pompeian clarion it heard. From what it wrought with the next standard bearer, Brutus and Cassius howl in hell together, and Moderna and Perugia dolent were. Still doth the mournful Cleopatra weep because thereof who, fleeting from before it, took from the adder sudden and black death. With him it ran even to the Red Sea ashore. With him it placed the world in so great peace that unto Janus was his temple closed. But what the standard that has made me speak achieved before and after should achieve throughout the mortal realm that lies beneath it, becometh in appearance mean and dim, if in the hand of the third Caesar seen, with eye uncloudeth and affection pure, because the living justice that inspires me granted it in the hand of him I speak, the glory of doing vengeance for his wrath. Now here attend to what I answer thee. Later it ran with Titus to do vengeance upon that vengeance of the ancient sin. And when the tooth of Lombardy had bitten the holy church, then underneath its wings did Charlemagne victorious succor her. Now hast thou power to judge of such as those whom I accused above, and of their crimes, which are the cause of all your miseries. To the public standard one of the yellow lilies opposes, the other claims it for a party, so that 'tis hard to see which sins the most. Let let the Ghibellines ply their handicraft beneath some other standard, for this ever ill follows he who it the justice parts. Let not this new Charles e'er strike it down, he and his gulfs, but let him fear the talons that from a nobler lion stripped and fell. Already oftentimes the sons have wept the father's crimes, and let him not believe that God will change his gudgeon for the lilies. Hey Lumi, welcome to the cafe. I am Reina d'Arcadia, one of the owners of the cafe. We are reading Paradiso right now, and it is the third book in the Divine Comedy. Alright, I'm going to continue. This little planet doth adorn itself with the good spirits that have active been, that fame and honor might come after them, and whensoever the desires mount thither, thus deviating, must perforce the rays of the true love less vividly mount upward. But in commiseration of our wages with our desert is portion of our joy, because we see them neither less nor greater. Herein doth living justice sweeten so affection in us, that for evermore it cannot warp to any iniquity. Voices diverse make up sweet melodies, so in this life of ours the seats diverse render sweet harmony among these spheres, and in the compass of this present pearl shineth the sheen of Romeo, of whom the grand and beauteous work was ill rewarded. But the Provencals who against him wrought, they have not laughed, and therefore ill goes he who makes his hurt of his good deeds of others. 4 daughters, and each one of them a queen, had Raymond Berenger, and this for him did Romeo, a poor man and a pilgrim. And then malicious words incited him to summon to a reckoning this just man, who rendered to him 7 and 5 for 10. Then he departed poor and stricken in years, and if the world could know the heart he had, in begging bit by bit his livelihood, though much it laud him, it would laud him more. Canto 7. Osana Sanctus Deus Sabaoth, Super Illustratans. I cannot read this, it's in a different language. I apologize. Hey, Maki. In this wise, to his melody returning, this substance upon which a double light doubles itself, was seen by me to sing, and to their dance this and the others moved, and in the manner of swift hurrying sparks veiled themselves from me with a sudden distance. Doubting was I, and saying, tell her, within me, tell her, saying, tell my lady, who slakes my thirst with her sweet effluences. And yet that reverence which doth lord over the whole of me, only by bee and ice, bowed me again, like unto one who drowns, who drowsies. Short while did Beatrice endure me thus, and she began, lighting me with a smile, such as would make one happy in the fire, according to the infallible advisement, after what manner a just vengeance justly could be avenged, has put thee upon thinking. Hello, Dragon King. But I will speedily thy mind unloose, and do thou listen, for these words of mine of a great doctrine will a present make thee, by not enduring on the power that wills, curb for his good that man who ne'er was born, damning himself, damned all his progeny, whereby the human species down below lay sick for many centuries in great error, till to descend it pleased the word of God, to where the nature which from its own Maker estranged itself, he joined to him in person by the sole act of his eternal love. Now unto what is said direct thy sight. This nature when united to its Maker, such as created, was sincere and good, but by itself alone was banished forth from paradise, because it turned aside out of the way of truth and of its life. Therefore the penalty the cross held out, if measured by the nature thus assumed, none ever yet with so great justice strung, and none was ever so great and just, considering who the person was that suffered, within whom such a nature was contracted. From one act therefore issued things diverse. To God and to the Jews one death was pleasing. Earth trembled at it, and the heaven was opened. It should no longer now seem difficult to thee, when it is said that a just vengeance by a just court was afterward avenged. But now do I behold thy mind entangled, from thought to thought within a knot, from which with great desire it awaits to free itself. Thou sayest, well discern I what I hear, but it is hidden from me why God willed for our redemption only this one mode. Buried remaineth, brother, this decree unto the eyes of every one whose nature is in flame of love yet not yet adult. Verily, inasmuch as this mark one gazes long and little is discerned, wherefore this mode was worthiness, will I say. Goodness divine, from which itself doth spurn all envy, burning in itself so sparkles that the eternal beauties it unfolds. Where error from this immediately distills, has afterwards no end, for ne'er removed it is its impression when it sets its seal. Whate'er from this immediately rains down, is wholly free because it is not subject unto the influences of novel things. The more conformed thereto, the more it pleases, for the blessed adore or ardor it irradiates all things in the most like itself is most vivacious. With all of these things has advantaged been the human creature, and if one is wanting from his nobility, he needs must fall. 'Tis sin alone which doth disfranchise him, and render him unlike the good supreme, so that he little with its light is blanched, and to his dignity no more returns, unless he fills up where transgressions empty, with righteous pains for criminal delights. Your nature, when it sin so utterly in its own seed, out from the dignities, even as out Paradise was driven, nor could itself recover, if thou notest with nicest subtlety, by any way, except by passing one of these two fords, either that God through clemency alone had pardon granted, or that man himself had satisfaction for his folly made. Fix now thine eye deep into the abyss of the eternal counsel to my speech as far as may be fastened steadfastly. Man in his limitations has not power to satisfy, not having power to sink in his humility, obeying then. Far as he disobeying thought to rise, and for his reason man has been from power of satisfying by himself excluded. Therefore it God behooves in his own ways man to restore unto his perfect life, I say in one, or else in both of them. But since the action of the doer is so much more grateful as it more presents the goodness of the heart from which it issues, goodness divine that doth imprint the world, has been contented to proceed by which, and all its ways to lift you up again, nor twixt the first day and the final night, such high and such magnificent proceeding by one or the other was or shall be. For God most bounteous was himself to give, to make man able to uplift himself, than if he only of himself had pardoned, and all of the other modes were insufficient for justice, were it not the Son of God himself had humbled to become incarnate. Now, to fill fully each desire of thine, return I to elucidate one place, in order that thou there mayest see as I do. Thou sayest, I see the air, I see the fire, the water, and the earth, and all these mixtures come to corruption, and short white endure, and these things notwithstanding were created. Therefore, if that which I have said were true, they should have been secure against corruption. The angels, brother, and the land sincere, in which thou art created, may be called just as they are in their entire existence. But all of the elements which thou hast named, and all those things which out of them are made, by a created virtue are informed. Created was the matter which they have, created was the informing influence. Within these stars that round about them go, the soul of every brute and of the planets by its potential temperament attracts the ray and the motion of the holy lights. But your own life immediately inspires supreme beneficence, and the enamors it so with herself, it evermore desires her. And thou from this mayst argue furthermore your resurrection, if thou think again how human flesh was fashioned at the time when the first parents, both of them, were made. Canto 8. Ascent to the third heaven, Venus, lovers. The world used in its peril to believe that the fair Cyprea delirious love rayed out in the third epicycle turning, wherefore not only unto her paid honour of sacrifices and of votive cry the ancient nations in the ancient error, but both Dione honoured they and Cupid, that as her mother, this one as her son, and said that he had sat in Dido's lap, and they from her, whence I beginning take, took the denomination of the star that woos the sun, now following, now in front. I was not ware of our ascending to it, but of our being in it gave full faith. My lady, whom I saw more beauteous grew, and as within a flame a spark is seen, and as within a voice discerned, when one is steadfast, and one comes and goes. Within the light beheld I other lamps, moving in a circle, speeding more and less, methinks in measure of their inward vision. From a cold cloud descended never winds, or visible or not, so rapidly they would not laggard and impeding seem to any one who had those lights divine, seen come toward us, leaving the gyration, begun at first in the high seraphim, and behind those that most in front appeared, sounded Hosanna, so that never since to hear again I without desire. Then unto us more nearly one approached, and it alone began, we all are ready unto thy pleasure, that thou joy in us. We turn around with with the celestial princes, one gyre and one gyration, and one thirst, to whom thou in the world of old didst say, ye who, intelligent, the third heaven are moving, and are so full of love, to pleasure thee, a little quiet will not be less sweet. After these eyes of mine themselves had offered unto my lady reverently, and she, content and certain of herself, had made them, back to the light they returned, which so great promise made of itself, and, say, who art thou? Was my voice imprinted with great affection. Oh, how and how much I beheld it grew, with the with the new joy that superadded was unto its joys as soon as I had spoken. Thus changed, it said to me, the world possessed me, short time below, and, if it had been more, much evil will which would not have been. My gladness keepeth me concealed from thee, which rayeth round about me, and doth hide me like a creature swathed in its own silk. Much didst thou love me, and thou hadst good reason, for had I been below, I should have shown thee somewhat beyond the foliage of my love, that left-hand margin which doth bathe itself in Rhone when it is mingled with the Sorgue. For me nor me for its Lord awaited in due time. And that horn of Ausonia, which is toward, or which is towned with Bari, with Gaeta and Catona, whence Tronto and Verde in the sea disgorge, already flashed upon my brow the crown of the domination which the Danube waters after the German borders it abandons, and beautiful Trinacria, with its murky twixt Pacino and Perloo on the gulf, which greatest scath from Eurus doth receive, not through Typhaeus, but through nascent sulphur would have awaited her own monarch still, through me from Charles descended and from Rudolph, if evil lordship that exasperates ever the subject populations had not moved Palermo to the outcry of death, death, and if my brother could but this foresee, the greedy poverty of Catalonia, straight would he flee, that it might not molest him. For verily 'tis needful to provide through him or other, so that on his bark, already frightened, no more fright be placed. His nature, which from liberal covetous descended, such a solitary would need, as should not care for hoarding in a chest, because I do believe the lofty joy thy speech infuses into me, my lord, where every good thing doth begin and end, thou seest as I see it, the more grateful it is to me. And this too hold I dear, that gazing upon God thou dost discern it. Glad hast thou made me, so make clear to me, since speaking thou hast stirred me up to doubt, how from sweet seed can better issue forth. This I to him, and he to me, if I can show to thee a truth, to which thou hast asked, thy face thou hold, as thou dost hold thy back. The good which all the realm thou art ascending, turns and contents, maketh its province, to be a power within these bodies vast, and not alone the natures are foreseen, within the mind, that in itself is perfect, but they together with their preservation, for whatsoever thing this bow shoots forth, falls foreordained unto an end foreseen, even as a shaft directed to its mark. If that were not, the heaven which thou dost walk would in such manner its effects produce, that they no longer would be arts but ruins. This cannot be, if the intelligences that keep these stars in motion are not maimed, and maimed the first that has not made them perfect. You alright? Wilt thou this truth have clearer made to thee? And I, not so, for 'tis impossible that nature tire, I see, in what is needful. Whence he again now say, would it be worse for men on earth were they not citizens? Yes, I replied, and here I ask no reason. And can they be so, if below they live not, diversely unto offices diverse? No, if your master writeth well for you. So came he with deductions to this point. Then he concluded, therefore it behooves the root of your effects to be diverse. Hence one is Solon born, other Xerxes, another Melchizedek, and another he who, flying through the air, his son did lose. Revolving nature, which a signet is to mortal wax, doth practice well her art, but not one in distinguish from another. Thence happens in that Esau different in seed from Jacob, and Quirinus comes from sire so vile that he is given to Mars. A generated nature in its own way would always make like its progenitors, if Providence divine were not triumphant. Now that which was behind thee is before thee, but that thou know that I am with thee am pleased. With a corollary will I mantle thee, evermore nature, if it fortune find, discordant to it, like each other's seed, out of its region maketh evil thrift. And if the world below would fix its mind on the foundation which is laid by nature, pursuing that, 'twould have the people good. But you unto religion wrench aside him who was born to grind him with the sword, and make a king of him who is for sermons. Therefore your footsteps wander from the road. Canto 9. Beautiful Clements, after that they Charles had me enlightened, he narrated to me the treacheries his seed should undergo, but said, be still, and let the years roll round, so that I can only say that lamentation legitimate shall follow on your wrongs. And of the holy light the life already had to the sun which fills it turned again, and as to the good which for each thing sufficient. Ah, souls deceived, and creatures impious, who from such good do turn away your hearts, directing upon vanity your foreheads. And now behold, another of these splendors approached me, and its will to pleasure me, it signified by brightening outwardly. The eyes of Beatrice that fastened were upon me as before, of dear assent, to my desire assurance gave me. Ah, bring swift compensation to my wish, thou blessed spirit, I said, and give me proof that what I think in thee I can reflect. Whereat the light, that still was new to me, out of its depths, whence it before was singing, as one delighted to do good, continued. Within that region of the land depraved, of Italy, that lies between Rialto and fountainheads of Brenta and of Piave, rises a hill and mounts not very high, wherefrom descended formerly a torch, that made upon that region great assault. Out of one root were born both I and it. Caniza was I called, and here I shine, because the splendor of this star o'ercame me. But gladly to myself the cause I pardon of my allotment, and it doth not grieve me, which would perhaps seem strong unto your vulgar. And of this salucent and precious jewel, which of our heaven is nearest unto me, great fame remained, and ere it died away. This 100th year shall yet quintupled be. See if man ought to make him excellent, so that another life the first may leave. And thus thinks not the present multitude, shut in by adage and taglia- tagliamento. Not yet for being scourged is penitent, but soon 'twill be that Padua in the marsh will change the water that Vicenza bathes, because the folk are stubborn against duty, and where the Sile and Cagnano join, one lordeth it, and goes with lofty head, for catching whom e'en now the net is making. Feltro, moreover, of her impious pastor, shall weep the crime which shall so monstrous be, that for the like none ever entered Malta. Ample exceedingly would be the vat, that of the Ferraris could hold the blood, and wary who should weigh it ounce by ounce, of which this courteous priest shall make a gift, to show himself a partisan, and such gifts will to the living of the land conform. Above us there are mirrors, thrones you call them, from which shines out of us God judicant, so that this utterance seems good to us. Here it was silent, and it had the semblance of being turned elsewhither by the wheel of which it entered, as it was before. The other joy, already known to me, became a thing transplendent in my sight, as a fine ruby smitten by the sun. Through joy effulgence is acquired above, as here a smile, but down below the shade outward darkens, as the mind is sad. God seeth all things, and in him, blessed spirit, thy sight is, said I, so that never will of his can possibly from thee be hidden. Thy voice, then, that forever makes the heavens glad with the singing of those holy fires, which of their 6 wings make themselves a cowl, therefore does it not satisfy my longings? Indeed, I would not wait thy questioning, if I in thee were as though thou art in me. The greatest of the valleys, where the water expands itself, forthwith its words began, that sea accepted, which the earth enlargens, between discordant shores against the sun, extends so far that its meridian makes, where it was wont before to make the horizon. I was a dweller on the valley's shore, twixt Ebro and Magra, that with journeys short doth from the Tuscan part of the Genesese, with the same sunset and same sunrise, nearly sit Bugia and the city whence I was, that with its blood once made the harbor hot. Folco, that people called me, unto whom my name was known, and now with me this heaven imprints itself, as I did once with it. For more the daughter of Belus never burned, offending both Lycaeus and Creusa, than I, so long as it became my locks, nor yet that Rodolphian, who deluded was by Demophon, nor yet Alcides, when Iol he in his heart had locked. Yet here is no repenting, but we smile, not at the fault which comes not back to mind, but at the power which ordered and foresaw. Here we behold the art that doth adorn with such affection, and the good discover whereby the world above turns that below. But that thou wholly satisfied mayest bear thy wishes hence which in this sphere are born, still farther to proceed behoveth me. Thou fain wouldest know who is within this light, that here beside me thus is scintillating, even as a sunbeam in the limpid water. Then know thou that within there is a rest, rehab, and being to our order joined, with her in its supremest grade 'tis sealed, into this heaven where ends the shadowy cone, cast by your world, before all other souls, first of Christ's triumphant, was she taken up. Full meet e'en was to leave her in some heaven, even as a palm of the high victory, which he acquired with one palm and the other, because she favored the first glorious deed of Joshua upon the Holy Land, and little stirs the memory of the Pope. Thy city, which an offshoot is of him who first upon his Maker turned his back, and whose ambition is so sorely wept, brings forth and scatters the accursed flower, which both the sheep and the lambs half let astray, since it has turned the shepherd to a wolf. For this is the evangel, and the mighty doctors are derelict, and only the decretals so studied that it shows upon their margins. On this are Pope and Cardinals intent, their meditations reach not Nazareth, there where his pinions Gabriel unfolded, but Vatican and the other parts elect of Rome, which have a cemetery been unto the soldiery that followed Peter, shall soon be freed from this adultery. Canto 10. The fourth heaven, the sun. Theologians and the Fathers of the Church. Looking into his Son with all the love which each of them eternally breathes forth, the primal and unutterable power, whate'er before the mind or eye revolves, with so much order made, there can be none who this beholds without enjoying him. Lift up then, reader, to the lofty wheels, with thy vision straight unto the part where the one motion on the other strikes, and there begin to contemplate with joy that master's art, who in himself so loves it, that never doth his eyes depart therefrom. Below, how from that circle goes branching off, the oblique circle which conveys the planets to satisfy the world that calls upon them. And if their pathways are not thus inflected, much virtue in the heavens would be in vain, and almost every power below here dead, if from the straight line distant, more or less, where the departure much would be wanting, be above and underneath of mundane order. Remain now, reader, still upon thy bench, in thought pursuing that which is foretasted. If thou wouldest jocund be instead of wary, I've set before thee, henceforth feed thyself, for to itself deriveth of my care, that theme that whereof I have been made the scribe, the greatest of the ministers of nature, who with the power of heaven the world imprints, measures with his light the time for us, with that part which above is called to mind, conjoined along the spirals, was revolving, where each time earlier he presents himself, and I was with him, but of the ascending I was not conscious, saving as a man of a first thought is conscious ere it come, and Beatrice, she who is seen to pass from good to better, and so suddenly, that not by time her action is expressed, how lucent in herself must she have been, that what is in the sun wherein I entered, apparent not by color but by light, I, though I call on genius, art, and practice, cannot tell that it could be imagined, believe one can, and let him long to see it. And if our fantasies too lowly are for altitude so great, it is no marvel, since o'er the sun was never eye could go. Such in this place was the fourth family of the High Father who forever sates it, showing how he breathes forth and how begets. And Beatrice began, give thanks unto the Son of angels, who to this sensible one has raised thee by his grace. Never was heart of mortal so disposed to worship, nor to give itself to God with all its gratitude was it so ready, as at those words did I myself become, and all my love was so absorbed in him that in oblivion Beatrice was eclipsed. Nor this nor this displeased her, but she smiled at it, so that the splendor of her laughing eyes my single mind on many things divided. Lights many saw I, vivid and triumphant, make us a centre and themselves a circle, more sweet in voice than luminous in aspect. Thus girt with the daughter of Latona we sometimes see, when pregnant is the air, so that it holds a thread which makes her zone. Within the court of heaven, whence I return, are many jewels found, so fair and precious, they cannot be transported from the realm. And of them was the singing of those lights, who takes not wings, that he may fly up thither, the tidings thence may from the dumb await. As soon as singing thus those burning suns had round about us whirled themselves 3 times, like unto stars neighboring the steadfast poles. Ladies they seemed, not from the dance released, but who stop short in silence listening, till they have gathered the new melody. And within one I heard beginning, when the radiance of grace, by which is kindled true love, and which therefore grows by loving, within thee multiplied is so resplendent, that it conducts thee upward by the stair, where thou reascending none descends, who should deny the wine out of his vial unto thy thirst in liberty were not, except as water which descends not seaward. Fain would thou know with the plants is enflowered, this garland that encircles with delight the lady fair who makes thee strong from heaven. Of the lambs was I, of the holy flock, which Dominic conducteth by a road, where well one fattens, if he strayeth not. He who is nearest to me on the right, my brother and master was, and he, Albertus, is of Cologne, I, Thomas, of Aquinum. If thou all, if thou of all the others wouldst be certain, follow behind my speaking with thy sight, upward along the blessed garland turning. Then next effulgence issues from the smile of Gratian, who insisted both the courts in such wise that it pleased in paradise. The other which nearby adorns our choir, that Peter who, e'en as the poor window, offered his treasure unto the church. The fifth light, that amongst us is the fairest, breathes forth from such a love that all the world below is greedy to learn tidings of it. Within it is the lofty mind, where knowledge so deep was put, that, if it the true be true, to see so much there never rose a second. Thou seest next the lustre of that taper, which in the flesh below looked almost within the angelic nature and its ministry. Within the other little light is smiling, the advocate of the Christian centuries. Out of those rhetoric Augustine was furnished. Now if thou trainest thy mind's eye along from light to light, pursuant of my praise, with thirst already of the eighth thou waitest, by seeing every good therein exalts the sainted soul, which the fallacious world make manifest within him who listeneth well. The body whence 'twas hunted forth is lying down in Eldorado, and from martyrdom and banishment it came unto this peace. See farther onward flame and burning breath of Isidore and Beda, and of Richard, who was in contemplation more than man. This whence to me returneth thy regard, the light is of a spirit unto whom, in his grave meditations, death seems low. It is the light eternal of Sigir, who, reading lectures in the street of straw, did syllogize invidious verities. Then, as a horologe that calleth us, what time the bride of God is rising up, with matins to her spouse, that he may love her, wherein one part the other draws and urges, ting, ting, resounding with so sweet a note that swells with love the spirit well disposed. Thus I beheld the glorious wheel move round, and render voice to voice in modulation and sweetness that cannot be comprehended, excepting there where joy is made eternal. Canto 11. O thou insensate care of mortal men, how inconclusive are the syllogisms that make thee beat thy wings in downward flight, one after laws, and one to aphorisms, was going, and one following the priesthood, and one to reign by force of sophistry, and one in theft, and one in state affairs, one in the pleasures of the flesh involved, weariness himself, one gave himself to ease, and I from all these things emancipate, with Beatrice above there in the heavens, with such exceeding glory was when each one had returned onto the point, within the circle where it was before, it stood as in a candlestick a candle, and from within the effulgence which at first had spoken unto me, I heard begin smiling while it more luminous became. Even as I am kindled in this ray, so looking into the eternal light, the occasion of thy thoughts I apprehend. Thou doubtest, and wouldst have me sift in language so extended and so open my speech, that to thy sense it may be plain, where just before I said, where well one fattens, and where I said, there never rose a second, and here 'tis needful we distinguish well. The Providence which governeth the world with counsel, wherein all created vision is vanquished ere it reach unto the bottom, so that towards her own beloved might go the bride of him who, uttering a loud cry, espoused her with his consecrated blood, self-confident, and unto him more faithful, two princes did ordain in her behoof, which on this side and that might be her guide. The one was all seraphical in ardour, the other by his wisdom upon earth. A splendor was of light rubical. One I will speak of, for of both is spoken, in praising one, whichever may be taken, because unto one end their labours were, between Tupino and the stream that falls down from the hill elect of blessed Ubald, a fertile slope of lofty mountain hangs, from which from which Phrygia feels the cold and heat through Porto's soul, and behind it sweep Waldo and Nacerna their grievous yoke. From out that slope there where it breaketh most, its steepness, rose upon the world a sun, as this one does sometimes from out the Ganges. Therefore let him who speaketh of that place say not Ascensi, for he would say little, but Orient, if he properly would speak. He was not yet far distant from his rising, before he had begun to make the earth some comfort from his mighty virtue feel, for he in youth his father's wrath incurred, for certain dame, to whom, as unto death, the gate of pleasure no one doth unlock. And was before his spiritual court, et coram patre, unto her united. The day then day by day more fervently he loved her. She, reft of her first husband, scorned, obscure, 1,001 years and more, waited without a suitor till he came. Not it availed to hear that with Amyclas found her unmoved at sounding of his voice, he who struck terror into all the world. Not it availed, being constant and undaunted, so that, when Mary still remained below, she mounted up with Christ upon the cross. But that too darkly I may not proceed. Francis and poverty, for these two lovers, take thou henceforth in my speech diffuse. Their concord and their joyous semblances, the love, the wonder, and the sweet regard, they made to be the cause of holy thoughts, so much so that the variable Bernard first bared his feet, and after so great peace ran, and, in running, thought himself too slow. O wealth unknown, O variable good, Giles bears his feet, and bears his feet Sylvester behind the bridegroom, so doth please the bride. Then goes his way that farther, and that master, he and his lady, and that family, which now was griding, or girding on the humble cord. Nor cowardice of heart weighed down his brow at being son of Peter Bernardone, nor for appearing marvellously scorned, but regally his hard determination innocent he opened, and from him received the primal seal upon his order. After the people mendicant increased behind this man, whose admirable life better in glory of the heavens were sung, incoronated with a second crown, was through honoris by the eternal Spirit, the holy purpose of this archimandrite. And when he had, through thirst and martyrdom, in the proud presence of the Sultan preached Christ and the others who came after him, and, finding for conversion too unripe bulk, and not to tarry there in vain, returned to fruit of the Italic grass, on the rude rock twixt Tiber and the Arno. From Christ did he receive the final seal, which during 2 whole years his members bore, when he who chose him unto so much good was pleased to draw him up to the reward that he merited by being lowly. Unto his friars, as to the frightful heirs, most dear lady did he recommend, and bade that they should love her faithfully. And from her bosom the illustrious soul wished to depart, returning to its realm, for its body wished no other buyer. Think now what man was he, who was a fit companion over the high seas to keep the bark of Peter to its proper bearings, and this man was our patriarch. Hence whoever doth follow him as he commands, but for new pasturage his flock has grown, so that it is impossible they not be scattered over fields diverse, and in proportion as his sheep remote and vagabond go farther off from him, more void of milk return they to the fold. Verily some there are that fear a hunt, and keep close to the shepherd, but so few that little cloth doth furnish forth their hoods. Now if my utterance be not indistinct, if thine own hearing hath attentive been, if thou recall to mind what I have said, in part contented shall thy wishes be, for thou shalt see the plant that's chipped away, and the rebuke that lieth in the words, where well one fattens, if he strayeth not. Sorry, I did needed to blow my nose. I didn't want you guys to hear the effectively like a baby elephant. So that was the first three cantos of, or chapters of Paradiso. I will read the next 11 chapters of Paradiso next week, and there will only we only have about 2 more weeks of this one, and then I need you guys to pick the next book for me. Um, in the Discord, if you guys go to Story Corner, I have a list of stories, and under story suggestions, you can put which book you would like me to read. So, Sagril is getting set up, and I will be shifting over to let him take over shortly once he is ready to go. It's alright, sweetie. So we're just waiting on Sagril to get ready. Does anybody have any questions or anything while he's readying up? Don't worry about it, rival. He's already gotten it. Alright, so I'm going to be shifting over. Make sure to give me a moment, sweetie. Alright, so make sure to refresh your guys' screen when we switch over, okay? me know when you're ready, sweetie. Honey, ready? Do a countdown.